Today, we're going to talk about the Irish energy narratives in the transition, IE-Narr. We've got a really good group together who've been working on this for the last while and undertaken a number of community engagement events. So Treasa, Thomas, Patrick, Zoe, Rosie and Emma from a number of schools all participate in this project we've supported. It's got a good bit of, lots of interest. Obviously, it's a big turnout today. And in terms of topicality, well, it's never non-topical, but I think it's increasingly topical, energy and how that affects local communities. So I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much. And thanks to the Earth Institute for supporting this project. So it won Strategic Parity Support Mechanism funding in 2023. Why is it taking so long? We all work in different things, and also 2 babies have arrived since. So just these are some of the reasons some of these projects take a long time. But just to introduce everyone as well, I'm from the School of English, Drama and Film. My name is Treasa. It's my colleague Thomas, who's in the College of Business. Emma Millett here, she's worked as a research assistant on the project. She's with Message. Rosie O'Reilly is here. She's part of Parity Studios and has been kind of working on a creative methodology as part of the project. Zoe O'Reilly, not related, couldn't make it today. She's a cultural geographer by training and has also been working and helping us think through the methodology. And also not here today is Patrick Brody from the School of Communication Information Systems or Information and Communication Systems, one or the other, I can't remember. And he's not here today as well. So we'll introduce some of his work. So the Strategic Parity Support Mechanism funding is designed to fund projects that are scoping exercises. So our project was intentionally broad, right? So you might think, well, it's got lots of tendrils, it's got lots of avenues for future research, it's got lots of different thematics at work. You're quite an interdisciplinary team. That's completely fine for these projects. They're meant to be scoping exercises that can help build you up to other projects or even help you think through future directions. And there's been other projects that have emerged from this already. So when we got together, we wanted to explore energy narratives at particular sites of energy transition around Ireland. And they were meant to be kind of representative of the broader shift in energy in Ireland. So we held a community mapping workshop in Kilrush in County Clare, where the Moneypoint coal plant is situated. It's been there for a long time. And very recently, after much prevarication has finally switched over to renewable energy storage, we held a community mapping workshop then in Tallaght in West Dublin. So it was one of our only urban sites, and there are a lot of data centres in this part of Dublin, West Dublin, the most in the country. And where we went to, it's been connected up to a district heating scheme. So we wanted to see that. That's being proposed as a future avenue for all of these data centres, that they'll feed back into our energy consumption in that way. And then we went to Galway and we held a workshop in Clifden, but was to kind of capture the community sentiment, particularly arising from Carna in South Connemara, around a proposed offshore wind farm. And traditionally, this is a part of the country that, as you know, it's a Gaeltacht, it's rural, it's very peripheral. A lot of the energy consumption comes from peat, and a huge storm had just rode through the area as well. So lots of discussions around climate change, energy resilience. So these are sites that are kind of paradigmatic of the energy transition that's underway in lots of ways. And we wanted to probe the different kinds of energy narratives that emerge at these sites to capture the legacy of historical narratives of energy consumption, underdevelopment, energy use, labour, say peat, belonging, so on. Are they still resonant in the community? The present of energy narratives too, where are they coming from? How do people understand their energy infrastructure, the policy transformations, their place within them, right, within these kind of national discussions? And then the future as well. What do people want from the future energy transition? How do they imagine their communities into the future? I obviously come from a literary background, so we often say that kind of future-facing narratives are ways of scenario modelling, right? Ways of imaginatively kind of preparing communities, of developing forms of resilience that help communities transition into the future as well. So what are these kind of forking subjunctive kind of paths, all these different kind of paths that communities imagine themselves into the future based on energy transition? Okay, what do they want? What do they think will happen? But also, what do they want? And where do they see themselves within that? So I'm going to hand over to Rosie now, and she's going to talk about the methodology.
So thanks. It was a great privilege to be involved in this project. I'm an artist in Parity Studios. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. It's an artist residence program within UCD based over in architecture at Roebuck, run by Emer O'Boyle. So it's a brilliant program where artists get to be within the institution working on various different research projects in an interdisciplinary way over a year or 2 years, depending on the project. So Rosie O'Reilly, who is a collaborator and who's not here today, she's a geographer. We work together quite a lot on kind of creative methodologies, particularly working with community groups. We're interested in kind of what boundaries can be pushed when we use visual techniques, mapping, for example, and we've worked on various different community projects together. So I suppose we're looking at what we can expose when we bring visual methodologies to the table. And I had previously worked with Treasa as well on a project within UCD, which was a brilliant kind of intro into this. And as part of my ongoing practice, I'm working now in Galicia and extractive narratives there, and Zoe's part of that project. So really what we wanted to do when we kind of were looking at forming the methodology for this was hold a group session with the interdisciplinary team and really ask the questions that how would we work together? So we took the kind of preliminary schedule for the event and we sort of mapped out the key questions that emerged from it. And what we kind of looked at were really different kind of methodologies that could be used that would kind of tease this apart. And if we work visually, what questions are asked around who we're working with and what work has to be done, particularly in a community context, when we know that they're a crucial part of this storytelling. Also, we were looking at transdisciplinary work as ways to collaborate, but also unsettle each other. So being around a table together and bringing different skill sets to the table, what does that mean for a project and what can be teased out? So an emerging kind of methodology that came from this was counter mapping, and some of you may be familiar with it, and also deep mapping, which is another kind of term used for it now. And a reading the project started really where we brought different readings to the table. And a reading I brought was this project called Tree School, which is an interdisciplinary project that really gathers people around trees to interrogate different questions around place. And this became a sort of a platform or a framework for us to kind of model the type of questions we would ask through this project. So it's run by by DAR, which is Decolonizing Architecture Art Research, Sandy Hallel and Alessandro Petti. And they say themselves, we started thinking about what kinds of tools, platforms or devices would be necessary to engage in discussions in different locations without neglecting the sites themselves. And that became crucial in the methodology. How do we not forget where we are, the interconnections in the site between the people, and as Treasa has said there, the histories of extraction and the future extractive kind of stories of that place. The Tree School has been a long ongoing project that has run over 5 to 6 years, and what they have kind of formulated at the end of it is these sort of ingredients that they bring with them to each gathering, and they gather around trees in different locations. And for us that kind of became a jumping off point. What ingredients would we bring together if we were to gather around a place, or in Kilrush for example, or in Tallaght around the data centres? And really what we realised was that the mapping exercise would become critical to this. We needed to map with the people around those sites and see what came out of it. 3 themes emerged continually. What happens to scale when we sit around a map? How do they challenge time? And what different knowledges emerge? And how it worked in practice is, and you'll see them on the table here, and hopefully you'll get time at the end to kind of sit with them yourself. And if you're from Kilrush or Tallaght, you can actually sit with that map and maybe read or look through some of the stories. But what we had was an OS map, and we had acetates on top of them. And each table was defined through policy, infrastructure, cultural heritage, but we also had a 4th table, which recognised that we didn't have all the knowledge and there was another place for local people to put stories or communities to put stories down. So these maps became the storytelling modes to unsilence and to bring further narratives to the table. And in practice, it looked very much like this. They were exciting places to be. The tables were full of energy. Stories were coming out. For me, there was a brilliant moment in Kilrush where the gentleman beside me was telling me about remembering his grandfather who set up a little rig to generate electricity off a small river at the end of his field. And he would bring that battery to local houses then to power electricity in the community. So there was these narratives that escaped through this kind of layering of cultural narratives, but also in the tables on infrastructure, various other narratives came through. Yeah, so another kind of this is the culture. This is an example of the cultural map in Kilrush, and what we did was dig into Dúchas in the folklore collection. So actually go into Dúchas and see, can we find any remnants or stories around Kilrush, particularly related to infrastructure and narratives around energy. And they were mapped onto this first, and then people could feed into those stories. So what we tried to do is expand the kind of storytelling methods that may or may not be present within the workshop.
Right. So just going to talk you through the first case study, which is Kilrush, County Clare. We'll go through all of them very quickly so you get a bit of a background on what the case study was and why we picked these particular cases. So Kilrush, County Clare is it's out on the west coast, and it is where Money Point is located, which for a long time was the biggest coal-fired power plant in Ireland, and it's also the site or the origination point, if you will, of the largest grid connection in Ireland. So there's sort of the ESB likes to talk about the highway of electricity that runs through Ireland, runs from Kilrush to Dublin. And Money Point, so that's where the red arrow is here, has really shaped the recent history and anyway of Kilrush in terms of employment, the local economy, etc. So as I said, it was home to Money Point, largest coal-fired power plant in Ireland, at least up until June 2025, when they ceased burning coal there and they switched to becoming a supplier of last resort using heavy fuel oil. And what is a supplier of last resort? It really kicks in when renewables aren't working. So we usually refer to that as a Dunkelflaute scenario, which is where it's dark. It's like a dark winter's day with a lot of cloud and no wind, right? So you don't have any wind electricity, you don't have any solar. So other fossil fuel installations need to kick in to keep the grid going or supplied. It doesn't happen very often, especially for Money Point, because it takes quite long to kick in at Money Point. So by the time Money Point is up and running, usually the crisis is over. So I think it's only kicked in like once in the last 2 years. Usually gas-fired installations are used. Why is Money Point still interesting? It's because originally, a couple of years ago, the offshore area just off the coast of Kilrush was designated a broad area of interest for floating wind. And it was a big plan, the ESB Green Atlantic at Money Point plan, which was going to use the existing grid connection at Money Point and feed in all that floating offshore wind energy into Money Point and then into the grid. So it looked like a very good transition from fossil to renewables, generating opportunities in the area. The only problem was that the Irish government decided to postpone this in mid-2024 because floating offshore is really an unproven technology at this point. It's only been developed at pilot scale. So they decided to focus on the Irish Sea and the Celtic Sea instead. But Money Point still has that major grid connection. Nowadays, it's very, very difficult to develop the grid because you get a lot of planning issues with planning and etc. land ownership. So there's an insistence by the ESB, by the government, that grid connection has to be used, but it's not entirely clear at this point what it's going to be used for. There is some battery capacity in Money Point, and they have the world's largest flywheel on site as well, which helps stabilize the grid. So they have those new technologies, but it's relatively small at the moment. It's not really clear what's going to happen, and that uncertainty plays a really big role in what we were interested in and what we found as well. So we were interested in the role of Money Point in the electrification of Ireland and the development of the Kilrush area, the shift from coal to low and zero carbon energy production, and then especially the potential impact of delays in that process, the uncertainty was being generated. And heritage, as Rosie said, heritage and cultural connections to fossil infrastructure. The fact that it's fossil doesn't necessarily mean it's bad for everyone, right? People may have very fond memories of working at Money Point, engaging with Money Points, seeing it towers over the landscape. It's lower lying than Kilrush, yes. When you're in Kilrush, you feel like it's over you. It's very big. So we developed a workshop. It was the first of the workshops. It was in September 2024, together with the Marine Institute funded ENACT project. So it's a project that I developed that runs for 4 years, and it will do similar work-ish to this project, but over a much larger timescale in Kilrush and in Whitegate, County Cork, where, as we now all know, the state's only oil refinery is based because it was blocked for a while, a couple of weeks ago. So finally, just to give you a sense of what we did, we had a 2-day program, including a site visit to Money Point. It's really cool, facilitated by the ESB, and we did community mapping, not in the local library, in the local community hall, with about 30 participants. And our mapping focused on just transition, energy, cultural heritage, and we had an open table. So you can say that map there is the energy map from Kilrush. So have a look at that if you get a chance. And we found that Money Point has played an important role in shaping Kilrush and surrounds over the last 50 years. And people are really aware of the need to further develop this, do something with it, right? But the question is what's going to happen. At the same time, despite insistence, especially on the ESB side of things, that Money Point had done a lot for the area, it turns out Kilrush is the second most deprived area in Ireland. And this is, again, really emphasized to us by community participants saying, you know, what's going to happen to us if Money Point leaves as well? What's left of the community? Where are the jobs going to go? Infrastructure. So what's the future of this community? And the uncertainty was just affecting everyone. And it doesn't really help. The shifts in government policy, especially around offshore renewables, they really haven't helped in this case. So it really leaves the community in the lurch. And that's kind of where we left it at that point. And then we moved to Tallaght.
So I'm going to read these slides out on behalf of Pat Brodie. So myself, Thomas and Pat each had specific interests and expertise in each of our case studies. And Pat Brodie, in case you don't know, has done a lot of work on data centres. And why are we looking at Southwest Dublin? The government's policy around decarbonisation is to support digital industries. It's very explicit about that. They call it a twin transition. So decarbonisation, the development of more renewable energies to support the expansion of digital industries and infrastructures, especially data centres. And digital infrastructures like data centres are taking on an increasing role in the burgeoning landscape of renewable energy utilities, from metering to monitoring to storage to potentially domestic heating as well. And this is having implications for how digital corporations are getting locked into these emerging systems, especially in Ireland, where these facilities use 22% of national electricity and reportedly 50% in Dublin alone. And there's an announcement of a new onshore wind farm in Offaly, down Clough, and that's in partnership with the SB and Amazon, right? So that's going to help fuel, right, provide the energy for Amazon data centres in that area. And this is an increasing pattern we see across the country. Southwest Dublin was of interest to us. Like I said, it's one of our only urban case studies. It's very deprived. I come from down the road, Clondalkin. It's got the most data centres in this part of the country than anywhere else. They're in these really, like, architecturally, they're very interesting. There's really like inhuman, massive parks that you can't walk around, you can rarely access. Like if you've ever seen a data centre, you see them if you're on the M50, they're like, there's no windows, right? They're very, very anonymous. And in Tallaght, the development of it in terms of urban infrastructures you see over there is quite interesting because it's so grid-like. It was developed from the 1960s, 1970s onwards. It's a very difficult area to navigate unless you're in a car. The village centre has been very much occluded, right? So if you live, a lot of the estates were built very far away from a village centre. They were built before the public transport was put in to service the community. And this came up in our discussion quite frequently. And there was a lot of discussion in this area around concerns around the overlap between issues of energy use and energy poverty, right? So this is an area with a lot of council homes that need to be retrofitted, that need to be refurbished. Again, were built in the 60s, don't hold heat. Concerns around the privatisation of the utility system, the types of public-private partnerships that are emerging through renewable energy and circular economies. And we're interested in how residents understood the complex processes of atmospheric and resource refinement in these systems. Sorry, I'll move on here. So we held the workshop in May 2025. In terms of participants, we members of local civil society organisations, environmental NGOs and political representatives, so local county councillors and so on. And for each of our sites, a really important part of our methodology was to ground it in the area through walking tours of some kind or another. So to try and get access to these energy infrastructures we're talking about, because quite often they remain inaccessible to local communities, right? So we talk about them a lot, but nobody actually knows what goes on inside, say, Money Point, for example. So we initiated a walking tour by local historian Albert Paris. So he talked about how the local cultural heritage was articulated alongside contemporary landscape. So you can see the layout of Tallaght still follows some of the roots of like early medieval times, like some of the road kind of structures are the same. They follow like the Poddle River, for example, but also the Amazon data centre and the district heating scheme you went to see there was located there also because of the Poddle River, much like the early medieval settlement was, because data centres need a lot of water to cool them. So we went and we looked at the Tallaght district heating scheme there, which is a partnership between South Dublin County Council and Amazon Web Services with Codema, followed by community mapping workshop at Rua Red in Tallaght. So that really helped to unlock all of the different kind of community narratives and stories that everyone had, because we've gone on this walking tour and we considered that articulation of ancient kind of cultural heritage alongside the contemporary landscape as well. So we had that initial shared understanding. Many groups involved were interested in contesting the role of data centres as a central component of Ireland's energy transition due to their environmental tolls, and collaborations between groups from the workshop led to a motion advocating for a data centre moratorium in this area. In addition, you're welcome to see our blog post. We've written blog posts from all of our workshops. We also produced a self-guided kind of walking tour. Initially, we're going to bring the community down to Clondalkin as well and try and do a tour of the data centre landscape there, which is co-located next to the Grand Canal. And we just didn't quite have enough time. But you're welcome to take a look at that as well. It's on our webpage. And we also brought in Sinead Curtin as well, who's a local artist who's been doing this like tree planting kind of exercise in this part of West Dublin as kind of like a counter map or a different kind of articulating a counter map of the area too, right? That we're always seeing it in terms of roads and infrastructure. This is an area that's very heavily urbanized if you've ever been there. Historically, places of like this that are kind of under development don't tend to have a lot of tree cover, for example, or a lot of public parks. And it's nice seeing Sinead Curran kind of try and reclaim those as well, the local community, to try and re-understand them as an area of potential biodiversity as well, not just kind of energy use, extraction, you know, so on and so forth. So our final case study was in Connemara in Galway, and this took place in November 2025. And why did we choose it? Because the Skerda Rocks offshore wind farm was a successful wind farm bid in the 2023 Offshore Renewable Electricity Support Scheme auction. It was scheduled for completion in 2023. It was going to be 5 kilometres off the coast, which is very near. So a lot of European countries advocate for wind farms, offshore wind farms, to be located about 20 kilometres off the coast. So it would be very much be visible from this area. It would have involved 30 turbines higher than the Eiffel Tower, of up to 325 metres in height. It was cancelled in 2025 after Storm Éowyn revealed that the wind farm wouldn't be suitable for this area because of the high wave heights and the very strong winds in the area, making nearshore wind turbines untenable, which the local community could have told the developers, because this place is called Iris Athnach, Oscuelga, or the Windy Peninsula. It's incredibly windy. And the local kind of cultural heritage and the built environment attests to that as well. So there are particular modes of dwelling that were built in the 19th century, for example, that are very low-lying to account for the strong winds. If you look at any tree in the area, it's bent over. There's lots of myths in the area. I dug into Tim Robinson's archive about how stormy it was. So Skerda Rocks, which is where the site was supposed to have been developed, Tim Robinson said some people called it the gates of hell because of the amount of spray that was coming in. Other people called it Atlantis, which is very like romantic, the kind of polar opposite, that if you squint because of the spray, maybe you can see kind of like a built development out in the Skerda Rocks. But anyway, had anyone talked to the locals, they could have confirmed that this was a very unsuitable site for a wind farm. We're seeing a lot more proposed offshore wind developments in Ireland, right? So you're probably going to see and hear of a lot more kind of community frictions, community desires to be heard, to be involved in top-down kind of policy planning and energy infrastructural planning. And the reason for this is because our climate action plan from 2019, which has been updated since, but the goals included providing 80% of electricity from renewable energy by 2030, to be carbon neutral by 2050, which is still the goal, net zero 2050. We've all heard this. The Irish government is committed to achieving 5 gigawatts of energy from offshore wind by 2030. The rural kind of periphery has actually always been important to Ireland's green tech future historically, but also going into the future. So Clifden was the landing post for the first Marconi Tower, a transatlantic wireless telegraphy service. The largest onshore wind farms are in Mayo and County Galway. The top 3 of them are all in Mayo and County Galway. And as I said before, the government's energy strategy is about this twin transition of digitisation and decarbonisation. And this picture is of a photo simulation of the proposed wind farm off the coast of Weenish. So this is southwest Connemara. And it just kind of articulates quite how huge it was going to look. And I think some people have done analysis of the image and said they would have been even bigger again, but just a particular way that the image was resolved was kind of made to make them look a bit smaller. But this really rallied the local community when these photo simulations were released. Okay, so we went in wanting to figure out how the community responded to the development of the cancellation of the wind farm, what kind of narratives emerged, and what do they imagine it would have brought for them as well? How did they understand that? And how do they intersect with the Gaeltach's particular peripheral status when in Ireland as well, right? So fragile ecosystem in terms of fisheries, the land as well. There's a huge amount of coastal erosion, but also fragile in terms of the community, the Irish language, the continued kind of heritage of that, what it looks like into the future as well. Okay, I'll try and be a little bit quicker now. Okay, so if you've read anything at all about wind farm developments, particularly massive wind farm developments that are put in areas that have no massive infrastructural project, you can imagine that the community were quite exercised, which they were. And they were really concerned in our meeting about what this would mean for them in the future, where would the energy go? We were able to show them some maps showing that electrical cables were proposed to bring the energy down to Money Point, and then onwards, presumably to Dublin or wherever else the energy would be needed. So that was very clearly visible from the plans. There was a lot of concerns in our community mapping meeting about the kind of friction between cultural values, local cultural values and understandings of ecology, and top-down environmental discourse, so sustainability policies. So there was a lot of discussion on how the community were like, we value the ecology. A lot of people there worked in nature restoration. We're doing kind of eco-informed art. We're farmers. We're in sustainable energy communities. Like they really want to see green transition, but they were like, is there a way we can do this that won't harm the local fisheries, that won't release large amounts of pollutants? Like the Macehead atmospheric station is near there, right? That would have been threatened by the development of this wind farm. It would have meant that the air would have been too polluted for any of their measurements, for example. And there is a friction between a desire to safeguard the local ecology, upgrade the infrastructure and transition to green energy. Okay, so I think I'll probably leave it there just to say we are still working away. So we're developing ArcGIS story maps in conjunction with Jeremy Auerbach and a master's students to try and capture the multiple kind of like mapping layers of data centres, renewable energy infrastructure. At some stage, we're going to input the community narratives as well into those, and we're working on a publication together. We're interested too in trying to articulate at some stage the interaction between small energy narratives and those kind of small energy communities like Rosie mentioned, like the person who's got like, you know, who's harnessing electricity from the river at the end of their field, along with larger scale infrastructural developments and policies, and seeing what those kind of, how those influence one another, right, what that articulation might be. And yep, I think I'm going to leave it there for now. And thanks for your time. If any questions, please ask us, and you're welcome to browse all of our maps.